morning, David. This is Jeff and Dr. Maroon.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning,
Good.
Dr. Maroon.
Good. Thank you, Jeff.
Dr. Maroon, first of all, I'd like to thank Claudia. This is Jeff, Claudina, and Eric for their comments. And David, your team is literally building a team here relative to the interpersonal skills and the emotion behind the ACTIVZ brand. And we're going to add the educational part. As David said, Dr. Maroon is a professor of neurosurgery at the University of Pittsburgh. He has worked with the Steelers for many, many years. We also both work with the WWE, the wrestlers. We have sports medicine in our blood, along with neurosurgery for the last 30 plus years. Dr. Maroon's going to give some background on some, and Claudina mentioned it, and the idea of epigenetics and the importance of the ACTIVZ products in activating or being a part of the epigenetic pathway. So Dr. Maroon, if you want to start off, I will control the slides for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. And you're correct, David. Jeff and I have been partners and associates for close to 30 years now. And it's been just wonderful working with him and also joining with you and the ACTIV group. I really enjoyed the two previous presentations. It's all about learning. And that's what we're going to try to share with you today in a few minutes, discuss the importance of epigenetics and the ACTIV product. So first of all, what is wellness? We have a slide here. It's an active process of becoming aware, making choices, dynamic process of change. That's all well and good. And I like to summarize it in the sense that we do not have a healthcare system in this country that is really very functional. We have a sick care system in this country. So it really, to a major extent, is up to each one of us to, as best we can, avoid those calamities and those diseases that are so epidemic. And we're going to talk about the epigenetic component of the diseases that we acquire. So when you look at approximately 2 million deaths annually in the United States, so out of a population of 320 million, 2 million funerals are held each year. And of those, close to 80% of the deaths are related to some kind of preventable disease, such as diabetes, cancer, and much of this is related to diet, and we'll dwell on that a bit. But as you can see from this slide, in terms of large-scale studies, relatively minority of patients have the recommended intake of vitamins, minerals, protein, and other supplements. So that just the big picture is that diabetes, obesity, atherosclerosis, GI, and bowel function are in a large part due to our deficient nutritional status. And so why don't people eat healthier? Well, it's all about choices, isn't it? And it's also about economics. And 60% of people say that or think that good food is too expensive. And if you go to the local checkout counter of your supermarket, you can see what's filled with high carbohydrate, high bad fat food that really leads to many of the problems and the premature deaths that we talked about. And you have to be so careful in many fast food restaurants. They're always laden with excess salt, and the food quality is not always optimal. And packaging, you really have a hard time deciphering what's really in the food you're purchasing. So how do we make healthy choices? And this leads us to the the concept that I'm going to introduce to you of epigenetics. And this slide really captures the essence of the whole situation. Why don't identical twins, the same birth twins, die on the same day of the same diseases if they're truly identical? And this gets back to epigenetics. So we know that we have chromosomes in every cell of our body. The chromosomes contain our genes, and the chromosomes are like a blueprint. Our genes are like a blueprint. They really don't do very much at all until they're acted upon, so that they're like a blueprint of a house on a table. And unless they're acted upon, they really don't do much. So what are the factors that act upon our genes to tell them to help us be healthy or unhealthy? So let's look at, this is such an important slide. So if we look at these four factors: diet, exercise, environmental factors, and emotional health. Just as an example, if you eat a Big Mac from beef grown in a feedlot, fed corn sprayed with Roundup, and then eat a big serving of French fries cooked in trans fatty acids and wash it down with a bottle of Pepsi or Coke, which contains phosphoric acid that leaches calcium out of your cells, this kind of a diet is going to tell your chromosomes and your genes by way of transcription factors to make inflammatory agents. So if you get a splinter under your finger, what happens to your finger? It gets red hot, tender, and swollen. Why does that occur? That's the body's innate immune response to protect you. Well, when you eat this kind of food and you get an inflammatory response, this inflammation affects your blood vessels, your brain cells, and your heart, to contribute to atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and arthritis, inflammation, which is the common factor in all of those. And if you don't exercise, the same inflammatory cytokines accumulate in your body and in the fat deposits that release these inflammatory agents over time. And the same with polluted air, water that's contaminated or not optimal, and soil that's the food is raised in, and stress. Our emotional stress, our emotional thermostat is extremely important also in contributing to inflammation, and hence cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. In contrast, if you eat a relative calorie restricted diet or intermittent fasting, if you eat a Mediterranean type diet with a lot of polyphenols and take the appropriate nutritional supplements, and you exercise and the clean air and soil, you don't abuse drugs, you don't abuse smoking, and you maintain a degree of emotional health through spirituality, relationships, meditation, these factors all contribute to anti-inflammation in the body and reduce the incidence of those diseases and those conditions that lead to premature death. So let's talk a little bit about our diet, nutrition, and genes. So in terms of our diet, obviously everything that we ingest goes through our stomach, our small intestine, and our large intestine. And as many of you have heard, there is indeed a gut-brain connection. And what we put into our body, good input and good output, junk in, junk out. So one of the main factors in gut health is butyric acid. Butyric acid is a compound that is essential for the cells lining our large intestine. These cells require butyrate. Unlike many cells in the body that require glucose, they require butyrate. And these cells are absolutely critical for controlling blood sugar, cholesterol, and also various chemicals in our brain, like serotonin, like dopamine, that control and markedly affect our mood. And Jeff and I became interested in butyric acid and ketones, which I'll explain in just a minute, several years ago. As a neurosurgeon, over the years, we've had too many patients with malignant brain tumors, referred to as glioblastoma multiforme. And these tumors, despite 20, 30 years of investigative research, there really has been very little progress in the treatment of these in terms of longevity. And we collaborated with Thomas Seyfried, who's a brilliant research scientist at Boston University. And Thomas has pioneered the use of what he calls metabolic therapy for the treatment of many tumors, not just brain tumors, but breast tumors as well. And it's based on the principle that when we were on the savannah in Africa, and we would feast when we could gather in enough animals to eat and feast on and gourmandize, so to speak. But when there was a drought, there would be feast and famine, starvation. And when there's calorie restriction or nutritional restriction, the fat that was built up during that period of overeating gets broken down into ketone bodies, which are essential for the brain to live on. Slide, please. So that the brain can survive on ketones for the most part, and the same with the heart. And if you think about it, cancer are relatively new developments in an evolutionary ancient body. And cancers are completely dependent on sugar or glucose for their survival. So the theory or hypothesis is using a ketogenic diet, we can starve the tumor, but still supply energy to the brain, the heart, and the other organs. And this is an example of a patient that we recently reported in Frontiers of Nutrition journal, a peer-reviewed journal, of a 32-year-old man who 7 years ago had a right frontal lobe tumor that you can see marked there, had surgical removal partially, and then he elected not to have any chemo or radiation therapy and put himself on a ketogenic diet. And 7 years later, he remains alive with a good quality of life. And basically and we're not saying everybody should go on a ketogenic diet to treat their cancer. But what we're saying in these kinds of anecdotal observations, that diet has an immense impact on neoplasms, the development of neoplasms, and possibly in the treatment thereof. So as a primary energy source, as I mentioned, ketone bodies can be utilized as fuel. And ketone bodies make up 70% of the brain's energy and 50% of the energy used for fueling other body tissues. So that ketones properly obtained through our diet are health-producing chemicals. Slide. So what does ketones and butyric acid have in common? Well, butyric acid contributes to the development of ketones, and it can be used, most butyric acid comes from fiber in our diet that's digested by healthy bacteria. This whole concept is referred to as the microbiome, the bacteria in our gut that breaks down the food that leads to healthy or unhealthy neurochemicals and nutrients. So butyric acid contributes to the health of the mucosal cells of the lining of the gut. And this contributes to you may have heard of the leaky gut syndrome. Well, this is when there's inflammation of the intestinal lining, and food that's ingested in particulate matter can literally leak through the bowel into the bloodstream and lead to an antibody response and hence an autoimmune disease. So again, butyric acid helps to preserve the lining of the gut, helps to control the formation of the neurotransmitters that control our mood and behavior, helps to lower our blood sugar, and also helps to control our cholesterol. Slide.
Dr. Maroon, I'd just like to comment on this, if you don't mind. This is probably one of the most important slides that Dr. Maroon has presented relative to butyric acid, as he says, is a ketone body that equals energy. So butyric acid, when you take it as links, has the potential to provide our gut energy. And the idea that energy is really lacking in the lower part of our gut. We don't eat a proper diet. As Dr. Maroon said, the epigenetic activations of excessive fat, salt, sugar, calories, poor nutrition, all lower the effectiveness of our colon. And that results, as he said, in leaky gut syndrome and other digestive problems, as well as affects our brain and other organ systems. So the linkage between ketones and the things we talked about, the glioblastoma tumor and the idea of energy metabolism is really important. And I think this slide, if you remember, this slide is sort of linking butyric acid to energy to boost our colon. Colon works more efficient, and those things potentially that can happen when you have poor absorption or poor bowel function can be resolved. Thank you, Dr. Maroon.
Very well stated, Jeff. And this slide summarizes the epigenetic regulation, if you would, and the positive effects of butyric acid and link. Anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, helps with insulin resistance and reducing obesity, very positive effects on our cardiovascular system and arteries, our immune system, and it actually is neuroprotective. And that's something that I'm very interested in. One of the neurotransmitters that butyric acid contributes to forming is one called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And BDNF does three things. It actually makes new brain cells. It enhances the connection or synapses between brain cells. And it also contributes to neuroplasticity, the ability to take all this information that we're discussing today and that has been and will be discussed and funnel it like a laser beam to an audience like this. To use your brain and to take all that information is neuroplasticity. So that these are the epigenetic effects of butyrate and why we're so literally high on it. So Jeff, if you would like to carry on from there.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you, Dr. Maroon. That was great. On this slide, I just want to also emphasize the idea and the concept of cytolock technology. butyric acid, when we first met David, we have a funny story that he might have told many people, is the fact that we've been working with brain tumors and the idea of ketones and butyric acid for a long time. And we happened upon different products over the years that had butyric acid. Well, when you come upon a product with butyric acid, you actually can be outside of the house and know that there's butyric acid in the house. It's because it has such a foul smell. And the production of butyric acid into supplements and products is very, very difficult. And we asked David point blank, how can you do that? I mean, well, how does that work? And we obviously took a bottle of Lynx and opened it, and it smelled perfectly normal. And it's the cytolock technology, the ability to lock in the molecular cells of butyric acid in a way that it doesn't have an odor, number one. Number two, it allows it to pass through, as Dr. Maroon said, our mouth, our intestines, and into the large intestines where it actually can do the most good near to the cells that are actually going to absorb it. So I think that's one of the differences that really stand out in the science and the concept and construction of this product is it has butyric acid. It has a way to not make it smell, and it has a way to get where it needs to be in order to work. So I think that's a very important concept to discuss with your clients. And this just summarizes all the different epigenetic benefits of butyric acid in the colon. It can epigenetically influence and prevent the colon cancer, and that's been shown quite normally. I mean, the development of colon cancer as a cellular versus developing into tumors, we believe happens quite frequently, meaning a cancerous cell will develop and yet our body can sense it and remove it. And that's an important part of our ability to prevent widespread cancers, especially within the colon. So it's very important to understand that a functioning colon has less likely a chance to develop cancer cells. And as Dr. Maroon already said about the anti-inflammatory effects of butyric acid, because it can suppress cytokines, which he discussed in the slide of the epigenetic factors. We talked about reducing inflammation, including the whole body. There's a brain gut link that Dr. Maroon discussed. Our joints are also affected with inflammation. So butyric acid has not just a localized effect within the colon, it can spread out to the entire body. So this is the product in summary. And again, it's a good slide that to have in your knowledge bank, the idea of it can directly provide energy to the colon cells. And when I mean directly, it actually can get to that area. It decreases inflammation in our gut and perhaps the entire body. It enhances vitamin absorption. We know that the colon is the place where vitamins are absorbed through the function of our microbiome, the very positive bacterium that live within our colon. And without them, we would not be able to absorb any vitamins. As Dr. Maroon already talked about, BDNF and other neurotransmitters are also increased, and also our immune function as well. So this is a product that we have been excited about and continue to be excited about relative to the ingredient, the main ingredient, which is butyric acid. So the next product that you all know as well is ACTIVZ, and the idea of directly combating inflammation, supporting immune health. It is considered also for minor aches and pains, but there's a different part of inflammation that we want to talk about, and that's the idea of silent inflammation. It's a word that really came about, I think Barry Sears, Dr. Maroon, was one of the first to talk about it, the idea of silent inflammation. This was probably in the early 80s. Right. The idea that chronic inflammation throughout the body, whether it's through our diet, lack of exercise, obesity, or other choices that we make, can affect all our organ systems. And this is where a product like ACTIVZ, and you might have heard of people taking a baby aspirin a day to reduce the incidence of heart disease, or even more than a baby aspirin. The idea that anti-inflammatories or something that can block inflammation can have body-wide effects. So both for the cardiovascular system, to prevention of stroke, diabetes, joint pain, degenerative brain diseases, All of these type chronic conditions that we develop with aging are all related to inflammation, and yet we don't feel it. That's why it's called silent. As Dr. Maroon alluded to earlier about getting a splinter, we feel that splinter. It hurts. It gets swollen, painful, tender, and red, but we don't feel or can recognize silent inflammation in our blood vessels. And this is why you unfortunately hear stories about someone having looking very healthy and all of a sudden having a heart attack or having a heart catheterization and showing diffuse blood vessel narrowing. It's because they never felt it. And the idea of silent inflammation is probably the leading cause of almost all conditions that eventually will kill us as we get older. ACTIVZ is designed, again, with the two main ingredients, which is turmeric, which is a known herbal treatment. It's been around for, well, it's been around forever. It's been used by humans for thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands of years, as not only a spice for food, but also as an anti-inflammatory. And then boswellia, which is also known as an anti-inflammatory herb. The point of the product is combining these two are better than one. So it's a 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 4. They have a synergistic effect. They work together in combination, which is stronger than they are separated. And again, the ACTIVZ product uses the technology that allows it to get where it needs to in our colon. Typically, these products need to be consumed in huge amounts because they're absorbed very quickly in the stomach, where they don't have the same effects throughout the body. Whereas if the cytolock technology allows it to get to the lower part of the intestines, thereby being absorbed where it needs to help. And this is a very complicated slide, and I apologize, but it just goes to show that curcumin or turmeric has wide-ranging effects on inflammatory molecules, specifically NF-kappa beta, which you see on the far right, is one of the most powerful inflammatory cytokines, molecules basically that cause inflammation. And they lead, excessive amounts of those can lead to cancer, vascular disease, and so on. Whereas curcumin, turmeric can really block those activating factors. And then genomics, we know as well, is another product of ACTIVZ that has a very good effect at activating NRF2, the idea of NRF2 being one of the most positive effects of blocking excessive inflammation or oxidative stress in our body. Oxidative stress is basically the byproduct of us living. Our cells are continuing to grow and divide. They need to breathe the oxygen we take in and put out carbon dioxide. All that functioning develops oxidative stress. And by consuming the right amount of products to lower the oxidative stress, we can try to lower the amount of damage that's done by too much oxidative stress. This product has natural ingredients as well that are all known to be powerful NRF2 activators, as well as antioxidants in their own right. And finally, one of the more exciting products that I personally have used, as well as my family, is the Arrow product. It's a fantastic energy booster and weight loss product, in the sense that if you have more energy and are more active, I think you have the ability to burn more calories. And it's always, what you take in versus what you put out as far as our metabolism. If you're eating 10 candy bars a day and sitting on a couch, you're getting way too much energy versus the amount of energy you're putting out. So this product boosts your energy. You want to get off the couch. You want to get moving. And these products, a lot of them look familiar to you, but in combination, they act as a synergistic way also to build your metabolism. I'll point out that they are thermogenic, which means they increase the metabolic action. So that's one of the ways that they boost energy and boost the consumption of energy or stored energy in our body to help us use our stored fats rather than that being laid down as more fat. And again, this goes to the slide. That's our friend, Dr. Maroon, by the way. He is a triathlete. Going back to Cardina's talk on, as well as Eric, getting off the couch and getting moving. I think Dr. Maroon plans his days quite rigorously as far as what he wants to accomplish each day, whether it's academically or physically. He's a triathlete, which many of you know, and this was a race I was very fortunate to join him, not as a contestant, but as a Ironman fan at the Ironman Championship in Hawaii. But again, Ironman, which Dr. Maroon is certainly one of them, can burn up to 7,000 calories a day, maybe even more in some others, but yet we don't burn nearly that much. So the idea or the concept of thermogenesis is the ability to burn fat. So there are supplements that can do that or help us, along with exercise, to burn excessive stored fat versus laying down more fat. And this is just the slide that talks about the balance. If you're balancing your calories in and balancing the amount of calories you're using, you're in balance. If you're eating too many calories, you're not in balance because you can't expend that much energy. So thermogenic properties cause more energy to be produced. And that's how one of the ways that we believe Aero functions. And just to go over, the idea of caffeine it's a caffeinated product, meaning there's caffeine in it, but it's not like coffee. It has a very slow absorption rate, which means the caffeine lasts in the body rather than getting a buzz effect. It can last in the body and causes increased alertness, lowers inflammation, alters our mood by enhancing dopamine and serotonin, and many of the other things that you see here as well. So the idea of caffeine as being a negative, I drink too much caffeine. Well, yeah, because you're getting jitters and you're getting it in your blood very quickly, versus if you can take caffeine in the form that it is in the Aero, you're getting it in more slowly, and it generally does not have the same side effects of nervousness or increased heart rate. And we've talked several times about the proprietary system in Optimed and Lynx, the idea that it needs to get where it needs to be in order to function. So in summary, as Dr. Maroon discussed, epigenetics explains how diet, physical activity in our environment, as well as our mental health, stress or not having stress, influences our genes for good or bad. The idea that there's really a link between what we do in our genes and what happens to our body. And ACTIVZ products have the ingredients to activate genes through the science of epigenetics to improve our health and wellness. Understanding epigenetics gives us the power to activate our genes through better choices. So really, this is one of the most important concepts of epigenetic, is about giving us the power to make better choices, to have a control over health, and not be willing to have sick care from the current hospital systems that we have, and rather be healthy. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of Dr. Maroon for being here.